the talks for the
Hello,
students.
everyone, and good afternoon.
I see right now we have
Thank you
45%
so much
in
for
sciences.
joining our
That's
event.
fantastic.
We have undergraduate research
36
ambassadors and present undergraduate
40
research
science
award
and computing are
recipients
starting to
here to talk to you
here.
about their
Who's gonna
research
win?
experience,
We also
how they
have
got started,
engineering
what
and
they're
some of the other
researching,
colleges.
who their
Stevens made a
mentors
great
are.
point. Feel
And
free
this is
to
your
introduce
chance to
yourself in the chat.
ask any
We've
questions
also got
you
the
want to.
Q&A.
There's going to be a brief introduction. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of my presenters to introduce themselves, list who they are, what they're majoring in, what their research area is, who their mentor is, because that a lot of has to do with they may not be researching in their major. They could be researching elsewhere. And then last but not least, one important fact of why undergraduate research is so important, especially for them, because they're the ones who really sought it out. So I'm going to start first with Carol Ann Espy. Carol Ann is the president of the Undergraduate Research Ambassadors, and I'll let her start. So Carol Ann, go for it.
Yeah, so I'm Carol Ann Espy. I am, as Allison mentioned, the president of the Undergraduate Research Ambassadors. We're a group of students that are there to help students find research on campus and then support them when they're in those roles. I'm a fourth-year biochemistry major with the research option tacked on, and my research area is technically in the biology, like school of biology. So I do research in structural biology in the Schmidt-Cray lab and the wonderful Cherry Emerson building, who, if anybody has been in there, you know that we love and hate it. But my mentor is a graduate student within that lab, Kasahun Neslu, and I started research primarily as a way to kind of figure out what I wanted to do, if I wanted to go more industry or research. But once I got into the lab, I realized that I just loved the research, the camaraderie of me with everybody else in the lab, plus like being able to see things that potentially no one else has seen before is really great.
Okay. Next is Charlie Wood. He's also an undergraduate research ambassador. Charlie, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm a rising third-year chem major. I'm Charlie Wood. I'm the VP of Advertising for Undergraduate Research Ambassadors. I've actually worked in the same lab as John Peterson before with Dr. Pillay. And so we focus on organic syntheses with epichlorohydrin. And the reason why I got involved is because I really enjoy the connection between what you learn in class and also what is actually being applied in the real world. So everything, all of the reactions that we are covering, they're like SN1, SN2, and you hear about them in class, and it's just really cool to see that connection where this stuff is actually useful. And if Kevin would like to go next.
Yeah, Kevin, great. Doing the round robin. So Kevin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tao. I'm a fourth-year BME major, and my research area is immunoengineering. I currently work for Dr. Kwong in the BME department, and my research mentor is also a graduate student named Shreyas. I guess the one thing I love about research is really how that can progress, like what we know and knowledge today and how we apply that. So when I focus on diagnostic technology, so there are like a bunch of new ways you can kind of detect a lot of things, and you can see how that's kind of important, especially with all the whole COVID stuff going on right now. Can I popcorn it to Robin?
You absolutely can.
Hi, I actually know John. Hi, John. That's the nice to see you here. But hi, my name is Robin. I am a physics major, fourth-year physics major. I'm doing research in material science and quantum computing. So I actually work in two different labs. One is with the PURA grant this summer with my advisor, Martin Morrigal, making or synthesizing quantum computers. And then my other lab, which is actually for the Georgia Tech Research Institute, building those quantum computers. So there's lots of optical design necessary and designing laser systems. And the reason that I do undergraduate research is that I actually think it's a lot more fun than class. I feel like I am a hands-on learner. I like to take my time to do a lot of background research and then apply that knowledge. And sometimes that's not something you can necessarily do in class. So I think research does a really good job at that.
Robin, we're going to popcorn it to John, and then we have one more participant after John, Nicholas. So, John, you go next. I didn't realize you knew all of these fabulous researchers.
Yeah, it's interesting the connections you'll make participating in research. But yeah, my name's John Peterson. I'm a chemical and biomolecular engineering major, but that is very far from where my current research is right now. I work in the School of Chemistry. And as you heard from Charlie, I've done work with him in Paulet's lab, working on organic synthesis and trying to scale that up to industry. So that's definitely more on the chemical engineering side. And I'm continuing to help them out this summer. But my PURA award for this summer is in a very different field from that. I work in physical and computational chemistry with Jesse McDaniel over in the School of Chemistry. And basically what we do is we simulate chemical systems from first principles, classical mechanics, and quantum mechanics to try to get some insight. And particularly, I'm leveraging molecular dynamics and quantum mechanics to model electrochemical reactions. If anyone here remembers that part of AP chemistry. But one of the things that's important about undergraduate research is, making these connections. Meeting all these people, seeing their diverse experiences in various different colleges and majors, as well as very different fields within the same schools and majors.
Okay, and now we're going to popcorn it over to Nicholas, and then we're going to go straight to the questions.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Nicholas Swaich. I'm a fourth-year mechanical engineer, and my area of research is exoskeleton design, or like wearable robotics. My professor is Dr. Gregory Sawicki. I guess I chose undergraduate research mainly because it was pretty readily available, and it offered a great way to get involved in real world problem spaces and finding these solutions. And it was just there at Georgia Tech, a lot of great opportunities.
Does every single person have a set mentor, or can that vary in the lab?
So I can speak to this a little bit more in my work with GTRI at Georgia Tech Research Institute. The whole lab has a principal investigator, a PI, but then there are a couple of researchers that are full-time staff, and they have PhDs, been there forever. But my direct mentor isn't actually the PI on that project. It's a different researcher that works with him.
Okay. Next question. This is a great question. Is a research experience helpful for industry experience, or is it tailored more towards people who want to pursue a PhD in their area of research?
The skills that you learn in research are really broad and versatile, and it basically proves that you can learn anything. So everything that you pick up is a useful tool for industry. I have a friend that really wants to go into sustainable agriculture. So he's really into the Impossible Burger, tofu, and all of that sustainable food. And so he's done a lot of research that isn't necessarily for that field, but all of the skills that he's picked up is still very R&D intensive. And so if you want to go into industry, you can carry everything that you have over with you, especially if it's a new field like sustainable agriculture. But everyone is always trying to do something different, trying to do something new. Like Coca-Cola has entire R&D labs for their bottle manufacture because they are a leader in sustainable plastic. So there are a lot of unexpected pockets of innovation happening, and research definitely helps with that.
Okay. I'm going to pitch this question to Kevin because he is the VP of Outreach for Research Ambassadors. And yes, this is my shameless plug. What advice do you have for finding research opportunities that are a good fit for our interest and for approaching those professors? Again, shameless plug.
Yes, as Allison said, I am the VP of Outreach, and I feel like there's a bunch of different ways you can approach this. The one I always recommend is another shameless plug is to come to the undergraduate research ambassadors office hours. So I'm actually in charge of creating a database where we ask different professors if they're looking for undergraduate researchers. So we have like that whole database if you want to contact us. And if you go to our website, you can also like find office hours, and we have them online right now, which might be really helpful to you. The other way, of course, is you can each department has their own website, and they also have a list of their faculty. And the majority of faculty at Georgia Tech also conduct their own research. So that's another way you can go through different professors and see what they're doing. Or sometimes, but each website also will group their own like research like interest into different links. So either way of going about those is like, it's up to you. And then when you approach a professor, I think we're in an interesting time with like COVID right now, where a lot of professors might be a little busy dealing with everything that's going on, especially since we're coming back to ramp up research at Tech. So for right now, I always say, and I'm sure a lot of my fellow panelists would also say, it's never like too early to reach out to professors. You always want to talk to them as soon as possible and like get their perspective on things. And really that's, if you want, you can also like come to our office hours, and we usually have a way, we have like a format that there's a way to email your professors. Also remember that when you talk to professors, it's not like talking to another student. You do want to be pretty formal when you first contact them and make sure you make a pretty good impression. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on that.
Okay, this is for the whole group. What year do people start pursuing research?
I said any year. There's no right year to start. It's really just whenever you're comfortable jumping in. It can be as early as even like before you're an incoming freshman, you can try doing something. I came from a high school that had a research program, and then you reach out really early, and it's a whole thing. John knows about it too because we went to high school together. But you can reach out as late as you can. There's no right way to do it, because as long as you have something to contribute to the lab, that's all they're looking for. So you can really get those skills early, or you can figure out what you want to do first in college, and then you can kind of settle in.
I know for the lab that I work with, I have a partner who tried to apply to work for the lab 2 years ago when he was a freshman. And the professor asked him a couple of questions about stuff that we do in the lab, and he was like, "Are you ready to take on something like this?" And the guy would didn't know anything about quantum mechanics, which is fine. Like, you'll eventually learn that in college. But he didn't turn him away forever. He just said, come back in like a year or two when you've taken these classes. And so sometimes that can happen too, where professors do want you, but they want to make sure the skills required to get the most out of your experience.
Yeah, and Robin rakes a great point there. The question we're always asked is, are there prerequisites to get involved with research? Do I have to have taken certain courses? And each experience and each professor, faculty member, research scientist, whoever you're speaking with, is going to be different. Some do want you to have a GPA, so some may not look at a first semester, first year student. But there are others that are not going to be that way. There are those that, if you're going to be working in a wet lab, they're going to maybe want you to have worked in a wet lab before, or at least been in lab research. So like a first year biology course, or a first year chemistry course, or a first year physics course. But there is training that goes involved. We don't just stick you in a lab and say, here, mix these two chemicals together and please don't blow us up. We're not going to do that. John has a really great question. Is it possible to get grants or funding for specific research? And if so, what steps or milestones must be reached or taken?
So there's one thing called PURA that's offered at Georgia Tech called President's Undergraduate Research Award. Essentially, it's a stipend, a $1,500 stipend for a semester of work that you gain depending on the amount of hours that you work during the semester. I was a recipient fall of 2019. And essentially, the requirements that you have to pass to get this is you have to have be in a lab with a faculty member of Georgia Tech, which that includes Georgia Tech and Emory faculty members they count between both schools. And then you have to work to write a proposal, and that proposal is the work that you would then do during the semester that you are applying for PURA. Simplified PURA is a stipend that you can get for semester-long research experience. The requirements are you have to be in a lab of a Georgia Tech faculty member, and in that lab then you have to write a proposal for the research you would do in the fall. So it's not necessarily like an outside research project you're bringing in. It could be something that the lab has already been working on, but it's really just something that you would work on with the faculty member of that lab to decide on what you would do.
The Georgia Tech Research Institute, even though technically the employees aren't faculty members, you can actually also use your PURA grant with certain members of the
PURA, President's Undergraduate Research Award. You have to either have a faculty mentor on Georgia Tech's campus and or Emory, and they can be an adjunct professor from Emory to Georgia Tech. And then we also allow research scientists at GTRI to support students for President Undergraduate Research Award. So as long as it's a faculty mentor or research scientist, that's the two qualifications for PURA. We do have virtual office hours this summer.
As Allison says, we have virtual office hours, and we basically have them every day from like 12:30 to 2:30. There's usually someone always stationed on there, and I just provided the link where you can go, and they'll give you some instructions to sign up for how to do it. And then it'll be like this, where you'll go on a Blue Jeans link, and you'll be like a one-on-one with one of our ambassadors.
Is there a link to the database where the opening for professor lab positions are posted or listed? The answer to that is no. The whole point of office hours is to come and talk to us. We don't post that.
Professors also don't like getting spammed. So also don't make feel free to contact a professor, and if you email them, you should get a response from them. But don't just have a template for every single professor that you're emailing, because you want to be able to tailor whatever your application is for every single position that you have, because one, that increases your likelihood of actually getting it, and two, it actually shows that you care about the opportunity.
When you reached out to find your position, what was the one thing that maybe you put in that email to the faculty member to say, hey, take a look at me, I'm a quality candidate?
I mean, when I did that, I made sure to mention all the stuff that I had done in like previous like clubs and extracurriculars that actually applied to what he was doing. Because he's not really going to care about, or the professor's not really going to care about like what like cross country team you're on or any of that sort of stuff. They want to know that you have like skills that can be applied to their research area.
Another thing that's helpful is to read up a little bit on the research that the professor's been doing recently, and maybe bring that up, maybe not so much in the email, but when you go to talk to them, be ready with questions about, what they're currently investigating. That shows interest, but you should also be interested in what they're researching if you're going to talk to them in the first place. So do some background research.
Okay. One other thing, it always comes up, should you send a resume when you send the email to the faculty member?
I usually include a resume, yeah. So when I write the email, I sort of format it kind of like a cover letter, right? Introducing myself, how I might be familiar with them or their work. Expanding a little bit on my relevant skills, and then closing it out, but then also attaching a resume for their consideration is a very concise way to get across the things you've done that might be relevant.
Okay, here's a great question that just popped in. What kind of advice would you give to a student who has not had research experience in the past but wants to get involved? What positions in the lab would an undergraduate student research generally have?
A lot of opportunities are not just led by professors. There are some opportunities that are led by graduate students. And those they're usually just looking for people who can start and get some work in and start learning those valuable skills. So that's a good start.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I was going to say it's not necessarily that official. So when a professors looking for undergraduates, that doesn't necessarily mean like there's a specific job listing that they have. When I became a member of the lab that I am still currently a part of, there were 3 graduate students working in the lab, and I was able to go between all 3 of them and kind of see what projects they were doing and kind of decided which one I found the most interesting to then work on. So it's definitely something that's like not as set in stone in different labs.
Okay, and then another question that came in is how much time, and this I think is the really pinnacle question for some of these students, is how much time do you guys spend researching, and do you still have the opportunities to study and relax?
Every time that you do like a 4-credit research opportunity, every credit hour corresponds to roughly 3 hours of being in the lab and researching. But as long as you go in with clear guidelines and expectations with your PI, it's so important to communicate what is possible for you, because if you don't tell them anything, if you don't tell them that you can't do more than 5 hours, they won't know that, and so they won't be able to accommodate you. But it's really whatever you can take on, whatever you can handle, and sometimes it's okay to take a break. Like for this past semester, I took a break because I was doing lots of other things. And it's important to grow in the lab, but also as a person. So sometimes you need the balance.
So I do different research labs, and that is, I have hours allocated for each one for, I think, in the fall last year as well. But I was only taking 2 classes because otherwise I would be wasting.
I think this question is also really important in terms of like what you decide to do in a lab. I know there are some like labs that it's easier to like divide the time and do like some work like in each times. For me personally, I work in a wet lab, and sometimes that means my experiments can't stop. So I'll spend sometimes a long day in lab, and maybe like the next day I won't spend that much time in lab. I think it really just depends like what kind of research you're doing will really affect like how much time you spend. Also, I've also found that like maybe sometimes while you're researching, for me, especially if I do wet lab stuff, you end up having a lot of like downtime during like different parts of the experiments, which I find really helpful for like times of doing for studying stuff.
Okay, we've got another great question, and Charlie just put in a great answer. But are some research positions paid? They are. It just depends on the funding for the lab. John, Robin, Carol Ann, Kevin, Nicholas, they've all received funding to be paid for their research. That's what the President's Undergraduate Research Award is. It's a paid stipend. They actually clock hours as a student researcher. They fill out a lovely online timesheet, although it used to be paper, and then they get a biweekly paycheck. And that's a paid research experience. And we give about 200 to 300 of those each academic year. So it's a great way to get paid for research. But is there any other ways y'all have gotten paid? I believe Caroline and Kevin can also speak about the Petite Scholars Program.
Yeah, I think fellowships are a great way to get paid. You'll figure out there's like a ton of different scholarships that you can gain through Georgia Tech, not only at our like institute level, but also at the national level. If you guys like keep going down the road of research, you'll figure out there are like big scholarships out there, like the astronaut scholarship, Goldwater and stuff, which pay a lot more money than you would expect.
There's also the College of Sciences Early Research Award, which is one that I received. And so there are a lot of different sources, and it's kind of just sometimes you're tapped for it and sometimes you find it yourself. So just keep looking.
I'll ask, how hard is it to get into a VIP?
Right. So vertically integrated projects is a bunch of largely independent, team-based research programs, and I sent the link in the chat to that. But if you look through the teams, there's a bunch of diverse different projects that they're working on. Oftentimes they're interdisciplinary. The one that I worked on was the ChemFlow team with Charlie, and I was a member of that for 5 semesters, starting the 2nd semester of my freshman year. And like was presented in the answer, it does depend on their availability. Some are more requested than others, and others have different requirements as far as how many people can be working on one thing at once. and how they can divide up the work. So it's really specific, but it never hurts to apply or email the professors asking a little bit more about that specific program.
There is, can you do undergraduate research work for work study, meaning federal work study? They kind of frown upon that, but it does occur. However, most students are paid 10, 12, 15, I've seen as much as $20 an hour. So it's a very rare occasion where it's under federal work study. They try to avoid that because of the funding dollars and where it comes from. You know, what is the best way to sift through academic research for someone who's just starting in the field to attain an understanding of topics that you want to research in the future?
I think I've got an answer to that one.
Okay.
Like sort of trying to get a feel for what you want to do specifically in a field, I think is the gist of the question. I guess the best way is to just try things out. I have worked in the School of Chemistry, but on vastly different projects. I've worked with Charlie in organic synthesis in a wet lab. I've worked with Dr. Martyr in a wet lab. You know, doing those very, I guess, standard chemistry type things. But my research now is in computational chemistry, which is all programming. So a very different field of research within that branch of the School of Chemistry. And I figured out that I wanted to lean more so into computational chemistry by just trying things out, like what do I like or not like about working in a wet lab versus working on my desktop here.
I thought the VIP website that the projects were only open to second years and above. Is this not true since John joined the second semester of his first year? It varies. They have allowed second semester students to go in. And a lot of it has to do with there's so many teams and there's so many openings. So what you would really have to do is reach out to the VIP program. Christian Marbu, go to the website. He's the program coordinator for that. And he can tell you whether or not you can get in. A lot of times students come in with more credit. So you're not coming in as what we consider a true first year student. You're not starting from ground zero. You may be coming in with AP credits, IP credits, tests that have gotten you out of certain courses. So you could come in with 20, 30. I had a student who was dual enrolled during high school. She came in as a junior. So, you know, it varies, the situation. It's not set in stone that it's only for second years and above. How big of an influence does undergraduate research have on securing co-ops or jobs in the future?
Yeah, it can definitely help, but there are so many paths in college that if you're just doing something that you like, you don't even have to be a leader. As long as you're passionate about whatever you're doing and you show like enthusiasm and you're a decent person, like you can go anywhere. So keep your options open. Don't feel pressured to do research because you're scared that it will ruin your career plans if you don't do it. Do things that really you enjoy.
That being said, I was able to leverage, research experiences and getting an internship. Specifically, my work in the VIP program, I was able to get an engineering internship actually at the local tap water plant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and keep in mind that there are co-ops and internships that are research focused. So sometimes that research experience, if you're going to work for a company, there's a research focus. Robin, were you going to add something to that?
Yeah. So both with my research at GTRI and with my PURA grant professor, I've seen pathways into jobs from there. So at GTRI, sometimes undergrads that work there in the labs will end up being offered a job later as full-time after they graduate, and you can even get opportunities to work there as a grad student and get your degree kind of working on research with them, but it's for your either PhD or master's. But then with my professor I'm doing PURA research with, he does a lot of collaboration with Oak Ridge National Labs, and actually one of his students that graduated this semester ended up going on to work for Oak Ridge because of the connections that he was able to.
So another great question that came in is, are student researchers' name included in publications of studies published by grad students and or professors and researchers? They are. We have undergraduates who are first authors, believe it or not. And that's more common than I think students realize. Any of my panelists, have y'all been authors on papers that have been published?
I've been on a published paper before. It's interesting.
Yeah, so it also really depends on like the field that you're in. So specifically, my field is structural biology, which is a field that typically takes a long time to publish in. So it's less common for like a publication to happen in the lab, so it's less common for students to be on those publications. So I've been in the lab since my freshman year, and I know that there are some people who are in a lab for a year and get a publication, but I've now been in there for 3 years, and just now we're publishing a paper. So it's definitely something to talk to the PI about and like the graduate students and see like the comment, how often they publish papers for the lab.
Yeah, and if you're interested in doing research and expanding it, and I think a couple of our students here are also research option students. The research option is a transcript designated program that allows for more extensive research experience, 9 hours of research and 2 writing courses. And every student who participates and completes the program ends up with a published undergraduate research thesis that is put on SmartTech. But in most cases, those theses are published elsewhere under that student's name in peer-reviewed journals and scholarly articles. I actually had a student who got a patent from that research. So we had to hold off publishing that student's thesis for 3 years. So it's really what you make of it. And if you want to look at the URA Facebook page, anytime a student has been published as a first author, and I find out about it, it's put on our Facebook page. Another great question, Charlie gave a great answer, is how much of a time commitment is it to be in research and manage classes? And I think that goes back to the time management question that a lot of first years struggle with.
Anything that is for credit or pay is kind of accommodated in with the number of credit hours that you register for. And that commitment is typically the standard amount of time that you usually dedicate to your regular studies. So it's not that much more to accommodate that into your schedule. When you are doing things like volunteering or trying to balance multiple labs at once, then it can get a little hectic because sometimes you need solid chunks of time dedicated to a lab. But that honestly depends on the field or the experiment that you're running. So be sure the end point that I have for you is that you always need to communicate what you can and cannot do with your professor, because people need to ask for help. It's hard to sometimes, but that's like the single greatest determiner of success, I think, for when you can actually do what you love without getting that burnout, because sometimes it's real. Sometimes you're not having the right balance, and that is heartbreaking because then you are kind of shunned away from what you love. And so always communicate if you need help because people are willing to give it to you.
Can someone define what a PI is? I think sometimes that gets students misconstrue what a PI is.
PI stands for principal investigator, and they're basically the head of the lab that you're working. They deal with all the paperwork in the background, and they decide who, and they write the grants, and they're like the leader, the big head leader for everything.
They're also the source of money.
Yes, that is very true. In most cases, the principal investigator or the PI is the head mentor, the head faculty of the lab. So even though a lot of our panelists work under graduate students, there's a person above the graduate student who's bringing in those research dollars. And just so you have an idea, if you didn't know, Georgia Tech's research budget is over $2 billion. So research is very important to what we do. A lot of times, undergraduate researchers or students, they commit themselves to too many things. And so one thing that, Stephen, favorite or least favorite parts of research? And then Charlie, can you do a quick plug about how important it is to reach out to the care center and the mental health professionals here at Georgia Tech? Because we know stress is a big part of research.
Yeah, so one thing beyond research that I'm really involved with is mental health on campus. Mental health is especially prevalent in the research community because academia tends to have a lot of stress on ourselves, and we don't talk about it. And so having conversations when you are in need of help is so, so important. And the first way to do that is to know how to seek help. And so we have the care center, which is an intake center, and you get assessed there. They do have limited capacity due to COVID, and so they'll have a 2-person wait room limit. But it's in the Flag building, which you'll know once you're on campus. And in this building, they'll do an assessment of like where you need. Do you need psychiatry? Do you need counseling? Do you need peer coaching? What's the problem? They'll communicate the next steps from there. They work with your insurance, and if your insurance isn't necessarily covering what you need it to, you can also transfer onto the GovTech United Healthcare Student Plan. There are so many resources on campus, and it's important to know what they are and how to access them. CARE is the launch point, so once you go through there, you can go to the counseling center with their referral, or you could go to STAMP Psychiatry from there. And there are also a lot of different resources off campus too, if you're looking for different options.
I've heard that when you first contact a professor, you shouldn't ask for a position in the first email, but you should first ask about their research. At what point is it appropriate to inquire about a research position?
Definitely say you're looking for an opportunity in research or just to get to know them better, but typically they'll usually ask you to sit down and interview first and talk to you about the research. And usually that provides a very good opportunity for you to actually ask if there's any way you can contribute to one of the projects that he or she was talking about. I think is a great time.
Favorite and least favorite parts of research?
My favorite part of research is, for me, I love designing my own experiments, and sometimes I always think that like the chances of something working is like 10% the first time you do it. But like if you are able to do it the first time, I that is usually the coolest thing ever. Least favorite part of research. So I do work in a wet lab, and the worst times is like when you're balancing school and lab. Sometimes I usually run like 6 or 7 hour experiments. So I've definitely been in lab at like 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. Just hanging out with my cells. So that was definitely not the most favorite part of it.
My most favorite part of research is, I mentioned it earlier, the camaraderie. So I'm in a relatively smaller lab where right now we only have 2 graduate students and 2 undergraduate students. And just seeing graduate students come in and out of the lab and all of us working together and having people come back and then going out to lab lunches with the group is really great. It's also like a great way to then get connections in different locations, because if you reach out to somebody who's like, hey, I'm working in the lab that you worked in when you were a PhD student here, and that's a great way to talk to them. So I was talking to somebody who now works at Deloitte, which is one of the largest consulting companies and is in Atlanta. So I was talking to them the other day just because she was in our lab like 7 years ago.
Are there opportunities for students to shadow current students involved in research?
Personally, for me, I don't see it that often, but I have had encounters where I do like sometimes show a student around like in the lab, usually to really like work or like be in a full day in lab, especially where I'm working. You usually have to sign a few like forms and stuff, and you have to go through the proper trainings. But I've definitely given like tours around the lab just to like students who are curious about like research in like a certain lab setting.
Shadowing is usually after a student has already contacted a professor and has kind of opened up this as an opportunity. What is important if you do find yourself shadowing is that you should ask about the lab's culture to see if it's a good fit for you as well.
Have any of you ever had where you started an experience and then you discovered it really wasn't the right fit for you, so you needed to leave that experience?
Have, yes. So early on in college, my sophomore year, I started working for black hole research, measuring emissions from black holes. Really, really fascinating. But there wasn't a whole lot of camaraderie in his research group. Whenever I would go and meet with him, it was one-on-one. We just talk. The other guy that I was working with on the project never showed up to research meetings, so it was really just me. What I was looking for was kind of a research family, and so I didn't return. But in my new lab that I'm in, I get that 200%. It's really amazing, and my research advisor is fantastic. Really, really well for me. But I do recognize that the way my relationship with my previous research advisor might work really, really well for somebody else. Somebody that likes more one-on-one. So that's why it's important to kind of try around and see what kind of.
Thank you so much, Robin. She makes an excellent point. It's, I have students that stop by my office and are like, this experience isn't working for me, or this faculty member and I don't see eye to eye, or I can't talk to my graduate student. It's okay to leave a research experience. It's okay to withdraw from a course. It's not going to stop you from getting into your choice graduate school or medical school or prevent you from getting a career in industry. I had a student come in and say, I'm afraid to drop from this because I'm up for a position, and they were up for a position at GTRI once they graduated. And I was like, well, it's still okay to say, this isn't working for me, and to have that conversation. And if it gets to a difficult place, then come and see me. Come talk to our research ambassadors. There's sounding boards for you to find the way to step away from it. Not every research experience is going to fit everyone.
And not necessarily requiring you to leave. So actually with my job at GTRI, semester the work that I was doing was a lot more difficult than anticipated based on actually went up and spoke to my mentor and PI about it. I don't really know the right skills for the kind of thing. Can you help me? So we ended up setting up weekly literature review sessions. And then this semester, this spring semester, work that I was a little bit. They were able to accommodate my skills a lot better. And so, if something's not working for you, I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that you fit. That you might need to have a conversation to make.
Mm-hmm. That's an excellent point.
There's also the option of doing research as a volunteer, which I generally recommend for some students with their first semester of research or their first going into a lab, because that way you can check out a lab and not be held to it for an entire semester, whereas for credit or for pay, it's typically a semester-long commitment. But for volunteer, you can come in halfway through a semester, 3/4 of the way through the semester, or start and then be like, this lab is not for me, and leave.
Best place to study.
So I like to study at Waffle House because on a weekday night, 3 refills for coffee. I was on a first name basis with the waitstaff. They knew my coffee order. Mika got a real estate license and I miss her. Great waitress, but she's living her life now. So, opponent of Waffle House.
I definitely can't top that, but I really actually enjoy working at my lab. It's usually pretty quiet, and we have an office and little desks and everywhere, and it's kind of nice to be around everyone. If you do see your lab as a family, it is really nice to just be around everybody while you're working.
And when you come on campus as first-year students, you're going to get the brand new Price Gilbert Library, which is cutting edge, a lot of study space. Libraries with books in them don't exist at Georgia Tech, so you've got you've got plenty of space to gather. There's group study space. I'm not sure how that's going to work with social distancing, but there is study space available. You can charge your laptop in a locker if you need to. You can borrow a laptop from the library if yours dies, which happens to students more often than you can imagine. So there's a ton of great ways. Got it. What's one thing you wish you knew when you were a first year about research?
I would say that I wish I knew it was all right to switch between labs, because as much as I do love the people in my lab and enjoy the research that I'm doing, I'm not sure that it is what I want to do in future experiences, and to know that it was all right to switch an earlier time would have been good to know.
This kind of applies more to the generic question of any tips, but it could also apply to research, is that know that this coming semester is a really big transition period. It's new for everyone. Everyone is struggling with coming to terms with everything that's happening in the world. So keep in mind that if you don't like whatever research opportunity you might find your first semester, if you don't like your classes, if you don't like the community that you're seeing, know that that is a period that will pass. There's a lot of change going on right now, so it's important to be kind to both yourself, to others, and it's okay if it's a scary world and you don't necessarily want to get involved in research right at the very beginning, or in anything. Just take a moment to breathe.
And we do know, COVID-19 and other things have been going on in the United States and across the nation and throughout the world have radically changed the way we do things. I can tell you right now, I never thought I would spend so much time telecommuting from my home or doing virtual work. I always thought I'd be in the office, to the point where now I beg to go to the office, even it's to pick up one piece of paper just for the hour drive there and the hour drive back, and to be in my car alone. So we do know it's going to change everything. And, these students, undergraduate research changed within 1 week of how we normally do it. These students who are in wet labs are now not in those labs. So Carol Ann and Kevin and those students that were working in a lab environment, a wet lab environment, how did the research change for you?
So I'm very lucky in that I am in a equally analytical and wet lab. So wet lab is like when you're in the lab using chemicals and that sort of thing and having to wear PPE, which is personal protection equipment. So I'm able to do the analytical portion at home. So it's just kind of shifted more to reading papers and continuing the analytical portion. But for Kevin, who I know does more wet lab stuff, he can speak to that.
Yeah, I guess my world was really changed by this whole COVID thing, because I spent all my time doing a ton of wet lab stuff. So that being changed, I was actually fortunate, one of my previous projects got picked up by a CDC grant to work on the COVID stuff, and having grad students and postdocs going in is really helpful for me, because then my project continues to go. So I actually help with the development of a lot of these experiments, and I still analyze it for my part of the end here, in addition to all the literature reviews and stuff that I might do. And I think it actually put me in a place where I kind of have to branch out. So I'm actually something new for me is I'm developing an app to help with readouts for a lot of my experiments. So it might be a blessing in disguise, but I don't know yet.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all our panelists, Kevin, Nicholas, John, Carol Ann, Robin, and Charlie. We really appreciate you so much. To Demoris and Stephen for helping moderate the question and answer, for Stephen doing that great poll. The winner for the college was computer science, College of Computing, with 42% of the students. Second was science with 37%. And believe it or not, we are an engineering main school. They were third with 21%.